What is going on, guys? It's your boy Edward V, and today we're going to talk about 5 negative side effects when you stop intermittent fasting. Now, I did a video on 5 negative side effects of intermittent fasting, believe it or not, and in that video I actually took the liberty of having some fun, implementing some acting into it. It's a pretty old video, but if you want to take a look at it, it is pretty informative. I'll go ahead and put the link to that video down below, but in this video I want to talk about the 5 negative side effects that would happen if you actually stopped intermittent fasting. I'm gonna go ahead and break it down in this video. Stay tuned. Okay, so let's just get one thing out of the way before we start. The thing that I want to get out of the way before we start this entire process of talking about these 5 negative side effects that happen when you stop intermittent fasting is that metabolism being broken or not working is not one of them. Just not one of them at all. That is a myth with meal frequency, with reducing meal frequency. What controls your metabolism going up or going down, or your basal metabolic rate, burning more calories or burning less? It all has to do with calorie consumption over time. It has nothing to do with meal frequency, if you're fasting, if you're not fasting. Simply calorie consumption over time. And what over time means is broad. It means daily, weekly, monthly. Calorie intake is not just simply on a day-to-day basis. It doesn't reset to 0 every time at 12 midnight, and then now whatever calorie intake you have is just gonna be encapsulated in this bubble. No, it's a daily, weekly, yearly, decade. As long as you live, how much calories you take in versus how much calories you put out is a constant. And if you drastically reduce calories over a long period of time, your metabolism will slow down, which is what's called adaptive thermogenesis. So I hope you know that. For some reason, a lot of people think that when they stop intermittent fasting, they're gonna gain all their weight back because intermittent fasting specifically destroy their metabolism, which is a false assertion. That does not happen, and no study has shown that this happens at all. Now that we got that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about those 5 negative side effects. First one is no more structure. That's right, you have nothing that you can do to control yourself in terms of how you are going to eat. Now, one caveat or one asterisk is that this isn't limited to intermittent fasting. If you were doing the Mediterranean diet, if you were a vegetarian, if you were vegan, whatever you were doing, once you stop doing that, you completely lose structure, dietary structure. And there's a problem when you lose dietary structure. You do need something. You cannot completely wing it. You may need a specific routine. Maybe you need the keto diet, or maybe you need to do the vegan diet, or maybe you need to do the Mediterranean diet. Whatever it is, there has to be a layer of structure, because if there isn't a layer of structure, you can just completely fall off because there's nothing controlling you. There's no path, there's no rail, there's no track. There's just openness, and with that openness, yeah, you might feel some freedom, but you won't reach your goals. So there needs to be structure. And if you get off of the intermittent fasting train and you don't jump onto any other train and you just get off, you will lose structure, and that will greatly come back to bite you, because you will start to gain weight over time. Because without structure, then what are you actually doing when it comes to eating? You don't know. Now, the second thing is directly linked to intermittent fasting, and it is the timing invisible walls completely go away. And why I call this the timing invisible walls is because these are the walls that prevent you from eating, because it's not your eating time frame. It's not your eating window. And yeah, it might sound very minimalistic, like, well, I just could eat if I wanted to. No, psychologically, when you are doing a protocol and you're following through with that protocol, you are hyper aware that you cannot eat at this time because you are outside of your eating window. If you are intently doing intermittent fasting, you will have to break your intermittent fasting protocol to eat that Snicker bar, or break your intermittent fasting protocol to eat that cookie. Think about it. When you don't have these invisible walls and you see a cookie and you're just maybe calorie based only, you might say to yourself, well, I'll just not eat something else later on that I might have been planning to eat. And you'll eat that cookie, you'll do some things, then you'll forget, and then you'll still eat that thing later on. And then you might eat something else because you forgot how much exactly you ate. So, it's not gonna do that much harm. And by the time you know it, you're 400, 500, 600, 700 calories above what you're supposed to be eating on a daily basis. Those invisible walls work to your advantage, even subconsciously. Just like I mentioned in that example. Creating those barriers actually helps you in the long run because you are hyper aware that you cannot eat. It's no longer this mental gymnastics or mathematical equation that you're trying to put together to see if you could just have that cookie. You know you can't have that cookie because it's not within your eating window. So those invisible walls completely fall down, and when they fall down, anything could happen. Now let's move on to number 3, and one of the more obvious things when it comes to intermittent fasting specifically, the hormonal regulation that comes with intermittent fasting will be completely gone. Now there's other things you can do. For example, autophagy can be increased by increasing muscle tissue. That's one of the ways you can increase autophagy. By being in somewhat of a caloric deficit, there's some elements of autophagy there. But the full hormonal cascade that happens with intermittent fasting isn't just autophagy. There is IGF-1 increase, oxidative stress reduction, insulin sensitivity increase, insulin resistance decrease, blood pressure decrease. All of these different things, they're all happening at the same time. They're all happening in tandem. And this will go away when you stop doing intermittent fasting and start doing other things, because the process of fasting alone, just the system of fasting, and they have tested this in studies by simply making both group A and group B eat at a caloric maintenance level to ensure that simply losing weight is not triggering all of these hormonal elements that come from fasting. And they noticed that all of these things like oxidative stress and insulin sensitivity and all of those things that I mentioned actually are still seen and are positive in the intermittent fasting group, regardless of weight loss, thus showing that intermittent fasting in and of itself is the trigger that actually activates these hormonal regulations. Now let's move on to number 4. Food intake awareness can easily be reduced if you stop intermittent fasting. When you're intermittent fasting, because you are compiling all of your food in such a small window, sometimes you're eating one time in the entire day, you are more aware of your calorie intake than if you were to just spread it all out throughout the entire day. And this has been seen multiple times because when participants are told, listen, group A, B, C, and D, you guys can eat as much as you want. There's no restriction. This is not a calorie thing. Eat as much as you want. Do not worry about it. The intermittent fasting group, time and time again, when given this ad libitum eating order, which is just a scientific way of saying that the participants can eat as much as they want, the intermittent fasting group always eats less. And a lot of people will fear monger you to tell you, no, the group that's intermittent fasting, they're going to eat more, because once they're allowed, their eating window opens up and they're allowed to eat, guess what? They're going to dive into all of these snacks. They're going to binge eat. They're going to do this and that. But they never do. They almost never do. All the studies always show that when calories are not equated and they're given the ability to eat as much as they want, they always undereat the calories that they're supposed to be within the range of for the day. And this is simply because they are more aware of how much they're actually eating. So once you stop intermittent fasting, that's gonna go away. And number 5, once you stop intermittent fasting, you have now effectively stopped the most flexible dietary intake protocol that exists right now. Now, I might get attacked by somebody that loves to do the Mediterranean diet and say, you must be out of your mind. The Mediterranean diet is the most flexible. I could eat so many different things within that system of eating whatever I want. Well, guess what? Intermittent fasting lets you eat the Mediterranean diet. And guess what? If you wanted to stop that, intermittent fasting also lets you eat a vegan diet. Or if you wanted to stop that, it lets you eat a vegetarian diet. Or if you wanted to stop that, it lets you eat a keto diet. It has no bias on what you actually eat. unlike any other diet system out there in terms of dietary intake, they always have a system of the actual nutrition and the macronutrient breakdown that requires you to eat a specific way that basically entraps you into that style of eating. While with intermittent fasting, you can choose to do 16 hours of fasting, or you can choose to do 20 hours of fasting, or you can choose to eat one meal a day, or you could extend it for 36 hours, or you could reduce it and extend it, or you can do Monday through Friday something, and then Saturday and Sunday something else, or every single day a different protocol, while implementing different diets every single day or testing different foods, never restricting yourself to what you actually want to eat at any given moment, be it something completely to the left or something completely to the right. It doesn't matter. And in that respect, intermittent fasting becomes the chameleon of all the dietary interventions that exist out there. So yeah, in my humble opinion, intermittent fasting is the most flexible dietary intervention that you can actually utilize because it allows you to eat anything you want. Of course, you want to eat healthy, you want to do all these different things, you want to eat at a certain calorie intake, but understanding that you are not bound to any specific food type, because intermittent fasting does not tell you what food to actually eat. And that's a huge plus that you'll be leaving on the table if you stop intermittent fasting. I hope this video was super helpful for you guys. And of course, I want to thank my patrons from my Patreon. I'm going to go ahead and put their names right up here. And of course, as always, guys, I'll see you on Wednesday for another FAQ.